Have you ever felt like you're living in a different reality than everyone around you? Like you're watching people sleepwalk through life, nodding along to ideas they've never questioned, following paths they've never chosen, believing things they've never examined. And when you speak up, when you question, when you refuse to simply accept what everyone else accepts, suddenly you're the problem. You're difficult, you're cynical, you're alone. And that isolation, it's not comfortable. It's not some romantic solitude where you feel superior to the masses. It's unsettling. It's disturbing. It's the quiet terror of realizing that most people would rather be comfortably wrong together than uncomfortably right alone. Friedrich Nietzsche lived this reality, and what he discovered will either terrify you or liberate you. Today I'm going to show you why refusing the consensus of the masses doesn't just make you unpopular, it fundamentally isolates you in ways that most people can't comprehend. We're going to explore the psychological cost of thinking for yourself, the disturbing loneliness of seeing what others refuse to see, and why Nietzsche believed that this isolation is not a bug in your personality, but the inevitable consequence of genuine thought. Nietzsche said, "The individual has always had to struggle to keep from being overwhelmed by the tribe." But what he didn't say, what most people don't understand, is that this struggle doesn't end with victory. It ends with exile, self-imposed, necessary, unsettling exile. In the next several minutes, we're going to dismantle the comfortable lie that independent thinking is celebrated in society. We'll explore why the masses punish those who refuse consensus, how isolation becomes the price of intellectual honesty, and what happens to your psyche when you can no longer pretend to believe what everyone else believes. This isn't motivational content. This isn't about feeling special because you're different. This is about the brutal reality of what happens when you truly think for yourself in a world designed to reward conformity. And if you're ready to understand why your refusal to follow the herd has left you feeling more alone than you ever imagined, then stay with me, because what you're about to discover won't make the isolation easier, but it will make it make sense. If you've ever felt like the only person who sees through the comfortable lies everyone else accepts, then you're in the right place. Subscribe now, because this community is for those who've chosen uncomfortable truth over comfortable delusion, who understand that real thinking comes with a price. Let's explore that price together. The first truth: the herd doesn't debate, it ostracizes. Here's what Nietzsche understood that most independent thinkers learn too late. When you refuse consensus, when you question what everyone else accepts without thought, the response isn't debate. It isn't intellectual engagement. It isn't curiosity about your perspective. It's ostracization. Swift, brutal, total. The masses don't argue with those who refuse their consensus. They exile them. They label them. They dismiss them. Because the herd's power doesn't come from being right. It comes from being unified. And your refusal to participate in that unity is a threat to the entire structure. Nietzsche wrote, "In individuals, insanity is rare, but in groups, parties, nations, and epochs, it is the rule." Think about that. The collective doesn't operate on logic. It operates on shared delusion. And when you refuse to participate in that delusion, you're not just disagreeing with ideas, you're threatening the psychological safety of everyone who needs that delusion to function. When you question the consensus at work, you're not labeled a critical thinker. You're labeled difficult, negative, not a team player. When you refuse to accept the political narratives everyone around you treats as gospel, you're not seen as independent. You're seen as dangerous, extreme, someone to be avoided. When you challenge the life script everyone follows without question, career, marriage, house, kids, retirement, you're not considered thoughtful. You're considered broken, lost, someone who needs to be fixed, because the herd doesn't want your ideas examined. It wants its ideas accepted. And the moment you refuse to accept them, you become other, separate, alone. And here's the disturbing part. This isn't conscious. Most people don't wake up and decide to ostracize independent thinkers. It happens automatically, instinctively. The tribal mind recognizes threat and responds with exclusion before the conscious mind even understands what's happening. You feel it in the subtle shifts, the invitations that stop coming, the conversations that go quiet when you enter, the eyes that won't quite meet yours, the energy that tells you you're no longer welcome in spaces where you once belonged. Nietzsche called this the herd instinct, and he understood that it's not malicious, it's survival. The herd survives through unity. Your independence is a crack in that unity, so you must be sealed out, pushed to the margins, isolated until you either conform or disappear. And this is where the unsettling part begins. Because you thought refusing consensus would lead to debate, discussion, perhaps even respect for your intellectual courage. Instead, it leads to silence, emptiness, the disturbing realization that most people would rather exclude you than examine their own beliefs. The second truth, intellectual honesty is social suicide. Now we descend deeper, because it's one thing to be ostracized for refusing consensus. It's another thing entirely to realize why that ostracization is so complete, so total, so irreversible. Nietzsche understood something brutal. Most people don't actually believe what they claim to believe. They perform belief. They signal alignment. They repeat approved narratives. But genuine belief, the kind that comes from rigorous examination and intellectual honesty, that's rare. That's uncomfortable. That's dangerous. And when you practice genuine intellectual honesty, when you actually examine ideas before accepting them, when you follow logic wherever it leads, regardless of social consequences, you expose everyone around you who's merely performing. Your existence becomes a mirror reflecting their intellectual cowardice, and people hate nothing more than having their cowardice revealed. Think about it. When you're at a dinner party and someone makes a statement that everyone nods along to, some popular opinion, some accepted narrative, and you ask a simple question, why do you believe that? Watch what happens. The room doesn't engage with curiosity. It freezes with hostility. Because you've just done something unforgivable. You've asked someone to actually defend a position they've never examined. You've revealed that their belief isn't based on thought, but on repetition, on social acceptance, on the comfort of consensus. Nietzsche wrote, "The surest way to corrupt a youth is to instruct him to hold in higher esteem those who think alike than those who think differently." And he understood that this corruption continues into adulthood. We're trained from childhood to value agreement over truth, comfort over honesty, belonging over integrity. So when you choose intellectual honesty over social acceptance, you're not just disagreeing with ideas. You're violating the fundamental social contract that says we all pretend to believe things we've never actually thought through, and we never question each other's pretending. You become the person who makes everyone uncomfortable, not because you're aggressive or confrontational, but because your mere presence reminds people that they're living unexamined lives, that they've accepted beliefs without evidence, that they've followed paths without choosing them, that they've become exactly what Nietzsche despised most, last men, comfortable in their smallness, hostile to anything that might disturb their comfort. And this is why intellectual honesty is social suicide. Because the price of thinking for yourself isn't just losing friends. It's losing the ability to pretend you still belong in spaces built on collective pretending. You can't unsee what you've seen. You can't unthink what you've thought. You can't return to the comfortable delusions that make social life smooth and easy. And everyone around you knows it. They can sense that you're no longer playing the game. So they remove you from the board. The third truth, the consensus offers belonging. You offer uncertainty. Here's where the isolation becomes truly unsettling. Because it's not just that the masses reject those who refuse consensus. It's that the masses have something powerful to offer that you, in your independence, cannot provide: certainty and belonging. Nietzsche understood this deeply. He wrote, "The lonely one offers his hand too quickly to whomever he encounters." He knew that isolation creates hunger, desperate hunger for connection, for belonging, for the warmth of the tribe. And the consensus provides exactly that. When you accept what everyone else accepts, when you believe what everyone else believes, when you follow the path everyone else follows, you get something invaluable. You get to belong. You get certainty. You get the comfort of knowing you're right because everyone around you agrees you're right. But what do you offer? Uncertainty, questions, doubt, the disturbing possibility that everything everyone believes might be wrong. Who wants that? Who chooses uncomfortable uncertainty over comfortable certainty? Who picks isolated truth over collective delusion? Almost no one. That's the answer. Almost no one. Think about the people around you. Most of them aren't stupid. They're not incapable of critical thought. They're not intellectually inferior. They've simply made a calculation, often unconsciously, that the price of independent thinking is too high. They've looked at people like you, people who refuse consensus, people who think for themselves, and they've seen the isolation. They've witnessed the ostracization. They've observed the unsettling loneliness, and they've decided, not worth it. Better to believe what everyone else believes and have friends than to think independently and eat dinner alone. Better to follow the approved path and have community than to forge your own way and walk it alone. Better to accept comfortable lies and belong than to pursue uncomfortable truth and be exiled. And you can't even argue with that logic, because they're not wrong about the cost. The isolation is real. The loneliness is real. The unsettling feeling of being fundamentally separate from almost everyone around you, that's real. Nietzsche wrote, "The higher we soar, the smaller we appear to those who cannot fly." And from the ground, your independence doesn't look like strength. It looks like arrogance. Your solitude doesn't look like chosen. It looks like inflicted. Your refusal to conform doesn't look like integrity. It looks like inability to connect. So the masses offer each other belonging, certainty, comfort, and they look at you with something between pity and contempt. Pity for your loneliness, contempt for your refusal to simply accept what everyone else accepts and join the warmth of the collective. And the truly unsettling part, sometimes, often, you wish you could. You wish you could turn off the part of your brain that questions. You wish you could accept without examining. You wish you could believe because everyone else believes. You wish you could return to the herd and feel that warmth again, but you can't. Once you've started thinking for yourself, there's no path back to comfortable conformity. The door has closed, and the isolation becomes permanent. The fourth truth, your mind becomes both prison and sanctuary. Now we arrive at the paradox that Nietzsche lived and wrote about so powerfully. When you refuse the consensus of the masses, when you accept the isolation that comes with independent thought, something strange happens to your relationship with your own mind. It becomes both prison and sanctuary, both the source of your suffering and your only refuge. Nietzsche wrote, "I am solitude become man." Think about that statement. Not, "I am a man in solitude," but solitude itself, embodied. The isolation isn't something that happens to you. It becomes what you are. When you can't connect with others over shared beliefs because you don't share their beliefs. When you can't join in collective narratives because you see through those narratives. When you can't participate in the social rituals of mutual pretending because you've lost the ability to pretend. Where do you go? Inward. Always inward. Into your own thoughts, your own analyses, your own frameworks for understanding reality. Your mind becomes the only place where you can be fully yourself. The only space where your thoughts don't need to be filtered, moderated, softened to avoid offending the consensus. The only refuge where truth doesn't need to bow to social acceptability. And that's the sanctuary part. In your own mind, you're free. You can think anything, question anything, examine anything. Follow logic wherever it leads without fear of social consequences. It's liberation, but it's also prison, because you're trapped there, alone with your thoughts, unable to share them fully with anyone, because full sharing would mean full isolation from everyone. So you self-censor, you moderate, you wear a mask in every interaction, showing just enough of your real thinking to maintain some connection, but never enough to trigger complete ostracization. And this creates a split, a division between your inner world and your outer performance, between who you actually are and who you pretend to be to maintain minimal social functionality. Nietzsche called this living behind a mask, and he understood that it's exhausting, that the constant calculation of how much truth you can reveal without being completely exiled drains your energy, fragments your identity, creates a persistent sense of inauthenticity, even in your closest relationships. Because even with people you care about, people who care about you, you can't be fully honest. You can't share the full extent of your thinking. You can't reveal how deeply you've questioned everything they accept without question. You can't show them how fundamentally different your worldview has become. So you stay partially hidden, partially connected, never fully known, never fully understood, always somewhat alone, even in company. And your mind, that sanctuary where you can be fully yourself, starts to feel like solitary confinement. Yes, you're free to think anything, but you're thinking it alone, always alone. And human beings, even the most independent among us, weren't designed for permanent solitude. Nietzsche wrote extensively about the cost of his own isolation, the migraines, the depression, the desperate longing for intellectual companionship that never quite materialized. He understood that the mind can be your greatest ally and your cruelest warden simultaneously. This is the unsettling reality of refusing consensus. Your independence doesn't lead to some romantic vision of the lone genius, content in solitude. It leads to this, a divided existence where your inner world becomes increasingly rich and your outer connections become increasingly hollow, where you're simultaneously more yourself than ever and more isolated than you imagined possible. The fifth truth, the masses don't hate you, they don't see you. We've explored the isolation, the ostracization, the exile that comes with refusing consensus. But now we need to face something even more unsettling, something Nietzsche understood that makes the loneliness cut deeper. The masses don't hate you, they don't see you, you're not important enough to hate, you're not threatening enough to actively oppose, you're simply invisible, irrelevant, a shadow at the edge of collective consciousness that the herd glances at occasionally with mild confusion before returning to the comfort of shared delusion. Nietzsche wrote, "The thought of suicide is a powerful consolation. By means of it, one gets through many a dark night." And while that's a dark statement, what drove him there wasn't active opposition, it was invisibility. The crushing realization that his ideas, his thoughts, his entire intellectual project was simply not seen by the masses he was trying to wake up. They weren't fighting him, they were ignoring him. And that's so much worse. When you refuse consensus, you expect battle. You expect resistance. You expect people to engage with your ideas, argue against them, try to convince you you're wrong. At least that would mean they're seeing you, recognizing the threat your independence poses to their comfortable certainty. But that's not what happens. What happens is nothing. Silence. Indifference. The herd moves around you like water around a stone, adjusting its path slightly, but never actually acknowledging the obstacle. Your carefully examined ideas, not worth debating. Your intellectual independence, not worth acknowledging. Your refusal to participate in collective delusion, not worth noticing. Because to the masses, you're not a rebel. You're not a threat. You're not even wrong. You're simply irrelevant. You've removed yourself from the only game that matters to them, the game of consensus, and therefore you no longer exist in any meaningful way. And this invisibility is the most unsettling isolation of all. Because at least if they opposed you, if they argued with you, if they actively tried to bring you back to consensus, that would mean you mattered. Your ideas had impact. Your independence was significant. But invisibility, that means everything you think, everything you've discovered through rigorous examination, everything you've sacrificed social belonging to pursue, it doesn't matter. Not to them. They're not even curious about what you see that they don't. They're not interested in your perspective. They don't want to understand why you refuse what they accept. They just want you to stop disturbing the comfortable atmosphere of mutual agreement. And the easiest way to make that happen is to simply not see you. Nietzsche spent his entire life writing for an audience that didn't exist, calling out to minds that weren't listening, offering insights to people who weren't interested. And the isolation of that, the unsettling reality of pouring your deepest thoughts into a void that doesn't echo back, that's the price of refusing consensus. You thought you'd be opposed. You thought you'd be challenged. You thought your independence would at least be noticed, even if it was rejected. Instead, you're a ghost, physically present but psychologically invisible, speaking words that aren't heard, thinking thoughts that aren't engaged, existing in a reality that most people simply don't acknowledge. And there's no remedy for this, no way to force people to see you, no method to make your independence matter to those who've chosen comfortable conformity. You can't argue someone into acknowledging your existence when they've decided that acknowledging you would require examining themselves. The final truth: this isolation is the price of sight. So here we are. We've explored every dimension of the unsettling isolation that comes with refusing the consensus of the masses, the ostracization, the social suicide of intellectual honesty, the impossible choice between certainty with others and uncertainty alone, the prison sanctuary of your own mind, the crushing invisibility. And now you need to decide, was it worth it? Nietzsche would say yes. Not because the isolation is comfortable, not because the loneliness is bearable, not because being invisible to the masses feels good, but because the alternative is worse. He wrote, "No price is too high to pay for the privilege of owning yourself, and that's what you've bought with your isolation. Yourself, your own mind, your own perspective, your own hard-won insights that no one handed to you, that you discovered through genuine thought. The masses own comfortable delusion and easy belonging. You own uncomfortable truth and hard-won independence. They sleep peacefully in shared illusion. You stay awake in isolated reality. And yes, they seem happier. Yes, they have more friends. Yes, their lives appear easier, smoother, more socially functional. But they don't own themselves. They're owned by consensus, by the tribe, by the herd's unexamined beliefs and collective delusions. They've traded their minds for membership. They've sold their independence for inclusion. You haven't, and that's why you're alone. Nietzsche wrote, "The snake which cannot cast its skin has to die." You've cast your skin. You've shed the comfortable lies. You've refused the easy path of accepting without examining. And now you stand alone, unsettled by your isolation, but unable to return to the warm embrace of collective delusion. This isn't victory. It's not some triumphant individualism where you feel superior to the masses. It's the quiet, unsettling reality of choosing sight over blindness, even when sight shows you how alone you truly are. The masses will continue sleepwalking. The consensus will continue functioning. The herd will continue its comfortable march toward wherever comfortable herds march. And you'll continue standing apart, seeing what they refuse to see, thinking what they refuse to think, alone in your clarity. If you felt this isolation, if you've lived this unsettling reality, you're not broken, you're awake. And wakefulness, as Nietzsche knew, is the loneliest state of human existence. Share your experience below. How has refusing consensus shaped your life? This community exists for those who've chosen uncomfortable truth over comfortable delusion. You're not alone in being alone. Now you know why the masses punish independence with exile. Now you understand why thinking for yourself leads to isolation. Now you've seen the price of refusing consensus, and now you choose return to the herd or accept the exile.